With the nation headed towards that fiscal cliff, we'll look at the view of the situation from the federal, state, and local levels. That is our top story this evening. Good evening. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Jane Aldrich. Sherry and Greg are off tonight. Well, senators are back on Capitol Hill and the president is at the White House. Still no deal to avoid that so-called fiscal cliff, but talks between the two sides are set for tomorrow. Well, tonight we're going to talk with a certified financial planner about what the fiscal cliff could mean for you. And we'll speak with two of the state's federal lawmakers about what needs to be done to reach an agreement. We start tonight with our coverage with more on the negotiation logjam. Here's Danielle Nottingham.
Top congressional leaders are expected to meet with President Obama at the White House Friday. This would be the group's first face-to-face meeting since November 16th and a last-minute chance to avoid the so-called fiscal cliff. If no deal is reached, taxes will go up for nearly every American and harsh spending cuts will kick in on January 1st.
The Senate will come to order.
Senators reconvene Thursday with tension spilling over onto the floor. Each side accused the other of stalling.
Speaker Boehner is unwilling to negotiate. We've not heard a word from Leader McConnell. And nothing's happening.
The phone never rang. And so now here we are 5 days from the new year, and we might finally start talking.
Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid skewered House Speaker John Boehner, charging he's more interested in his leadership position than in bipartisan legislation.
The Speaker's #1 goal is to get elected Speaker on January 3rd.
The two sides are at odds over tax cuts and spending, but Republicans say it's up to the democratically controlled Senate and White House to reach an agreement.
Republicans aren't about to write a blank check for anything Senate Democrats put forward just because we find ourselves at the edge of the cliff.
Members of the House were told to come back to Washington Sunday evening. They would have a little more than 24 hours to vote on a measure to avoid the fiscal cliff. Danielle Nottingham, CBS News, Washington.
So what are Michigan's congressional representatives saying about this situation going on in Washington? Well, tonight our Nick Perot looked at why it's taking so long for the Senate and House to make a deal.
We do have a situation.
U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow says if it were left up to the Senate, millions of Americans wouldn't be facing a potential tax hike in late December.
I don't blame people for being incredibly frustrated. I'm incredibly frustrated.
That's because Senator Stabenow says the House is not doing their part to prevent going over the so-called fiscal cliff.
We actually passed a bipartisan bill back in July, Senate to the House. All they have to do is pass it, and any income up to $250,000 will continue to get a tax cut.
And that tax cut would equal a savings of about $2,200 a year.
We don't have that legislation.
Representative Tim Walberg says that bill was never read into the record, which means they couldn't act on it. But he says there is a bill in the Senate's hands that could resolve this crisis.
We sent a fiscal cliff repealer back in August that took care of all of the extensions so that no one received a tax increase.
So the big question on many people's mind is why hasn't a deal been made? Walberg says the Senate is sitting on that plan.
It's time for the Senate, Harry Reid, with some goodwill, to at the very least disagree with our legislation, put their amendments on and send it back to the House.
That way they can work on it when they return to Capitol Hill on Sunday. Otherwise, Walberg says a big piece of hope and money will disappear from millions of Americans' wallets across the country. In Lansing, Nick Perot, 6 News.
Thanks, Nick. Protesters from a group called The Action took turns outside of Representative Tim Walberg's Jackson office for 12 hours today to send him a message, strike a deal in Congress, and avoid the fiscal cliff. This group is calling for lawmakers to end Bush-era tax cuts and stop taxes from increasing on middle-class Americans.
Not many households can afford to lose money at this point where everyone's hurting a little bit, and we all just need to work together. And Congress needs to work together to come up with a deal so we don't hurt as households.
And according to the Tax Policy Center, falling off the fiscal cliff means taxes will increase an average of $2,000 for middle-class Americans. Well, joining me now to talk about finances, your finances, and what you can do to avoid a fiscal cliff with your investments is our financial advisor, Ted Feight. Thanks for being with us, Ted.
Thanks for having me.
We are looking at this now thinking, okay, what about any disposable income somebody might still have after 4 years of a recession? What should we know about and what can we do to save our precious earned money?
Well, right now you should take a look at any capital gains you've got, and you should sell them before the end of the year, because your tax bracket's going to be fair. Your capital gain tax will be 15% rather than maybe 20, 25, or 28.
Okay.
So that's the first thing. I've got a lot of clients who are actually putting money from an IRA into a Roth, so it will be tax-free when it comes out, and we're in a rush with a lot of that right now.
Right.
Also, you probably should look at your investments, because if something doesn't change, what we've been doing for the last few years hasn't been working for the last 2. And now we're starting to have to change things, both in your 401k, your IRA, and your individual investments. You're going to want more money in your 401k and your IRA right now, because it'll be tax sheltered as we go forward.
Now, we're talking, you know, towards the end of the year here. I mean, we've got New Year's Days coming up next week, Ted. Really, what can we conceivably do in this short amount of time? Or will we have some kind of, you know, lag time next week to take care of these things?
I don't think you're going to have any lag time at all. And I think we're going over the cliff. I don't think there's any doubt about that right now.
Okay. You probably get a lot of calls, people saying, help me, help me. But at this point, it's probably good to have an advisor to give you at least some kind of explanation and help.
And find out whether you're doing something you should or shouldn't be doing right now. Calling your own personal financial advisor is what you need to do. You need to find out. Okay. A lot of times people think they're doing the right thing, and yet they're not.
And so you need the advisor and those experts to let you know.
Yes.
Ted Feight, we're always happy to talk to you, and good luck the next couple of days. I know you're going to be a busy man.
It's going to be busy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. And of course, we'll have continuing coverage of the negotiations both on air, online at WLNS.com.